Okay, Ma, where were you born? And when?
I was born on September 8, 1903, in the small town of San Isidro, Nueva Ecija, which was then the capital of the province.
So do you remember anything about the early occupation, early American occupation of the Philippines?
Well, actually the Filipinos were afraid of the Americans in the beginning because as invaders they were thought to be sort of robbers. But then the Americans paid in gold coins for everything they got. So the people were encouraged to give them chickens. Actually, the Americans wanted food. And so the Filipinos really readily gave them food, seeing that they were not robbers but friendly people.
What about your mother? Did she remember anything about the war, the Phil-American War, or the revolution against Spain?
Yes, well, she said they left our hometown, and that time was called Takbuhan because they wanted to avoid the war. Many people enrolled in the Philippine Army. My father could not join them because he was sort of sickly, and so he preferred to stay behind. But the Americans were very friendly, and they began teaching the people, and they thought at first that Spanish was the language, and therefore they were quite ready to import some Spanish instructors. But then they found out that the people didn't know Spanish at all, because you see, the Spaniards did not teach Spanish, although it was their national language. And the Filipinos, previous to that time, had to go to Spain in order to obtain an education. As a result, Paterno and the enlightened ones, so-called, had to go abroad to Spain and Europe, London, in order to get a college education.
Well, this is the first time I've heard that that the Americans thought of importing Spaniards. I thought all the time that they had determined to impose English on the people.
No, as I said, that is my recollection, and that is, I think, what President McKinley even wanted to do.
To import Spaniards.
Well, to teach Spanish at least.
Yeah. Now, you said that the high school in your hometown was the first American public school in the Philippines? Did you once tell me that?
Uh,
Is it called the Wright School?
it was called the Wright Institute,
Right.
named after the Governor General Wright, and it was established in San Isidro because the choice fell upon the town in Nueva Ecija, which could provide free land. And my father and Mr. Sideco both donated a piece of land so that the school could be established there. I remember that even the wood came from the United States. Can you imagine having pine wood in the Philippines?
Why did they have to import it?
Well, I don't know. It's what I couldn't understand. But it was called the Wright Institute. Later on, it became the Nueva Ecija High School. And since the school was just in front of, practically in front of our house, just across the street, we were able to get a public education because the fashion then was to send their daughters to the finishing schools in Manila, and then they would come back and just do their old work like cooking and
After getting an education in the city, they would go back to the towns to
yes,
go back
yes,
to their old housework.
yes, because they never thought of going to college and or much less going to public school.
Well, what did they learn in Manila?
Well, mostly religion, embroidery, just what the curriculum was then for finishing schools.
And then, but you got a regular,
Yes,
well-rounded education.
yes, well, I started studying in the public schools. And as I said, it was, I think, mostly because the high school was just across the house. And although my father was very strict, it was co-educational, and I had to compete with the boys.
But were there many girls in the school?
There were quite few, and when I graduated from high school, there were only 4 girls, and 2 of us were sisters. One was from Santa Rosa, and another one was from I don't remember when, but we were only 4 girls, and
This was high school. Fourth year high
from
school.
the public high school. So although I was the valedictorian of the class, my father said, you're just valedictorian here from a small town public high school. When you go to the University of the Philippines, which was then the only university to which valedictorians went, said, I shall probably never hear about your name anymore.
So you say that there were very few girls in the high school. Was it because they were not interested in going to school, or because their parents didn't let them go to school?
Well, it was mostly because their parents didn't let them go to school.
And then you say that your sister dropped out of school at what?
Yes, it was not her own choice, but my father told her to stop studying because love letters began coming in, and although she never answered them, and she never really, in those days, I didn't even look back. At my classmates, I was always just looking at the blackboard or at the teacher.
So, but did your sister object to being made to stop schooling?
No,
Grade
she could
5?
not object because that was my father's decision. Later on, when her classmates, one of those who went to the public high school was a Sideco, who came out salutatorian of her class. And it was only because father, I think, having donated a piece of land, felt that it was his duty to send a daughter to the public school. Later on, my father was allowing her to go back to school, but she was so far behind her previous classmates that she did not care to go.
Or did she make up for it later on? Did she compensate? Did you try to teach her? Or she just had to satisfy herself with what she had learned?
She just had to satisfy herself. But she was very bright because when I was in the 4th grade, I remember that she used to tutor me.
And when did you become interested in women's rights?
Of the educated woman. I thought then that
Okay. Start again.
Right now?
Yep.
Okay, so when did you become interested in women's rights? How old were you?
one was interested even when I was young, but mainly because
Hang on a second. Ask that question again. This can't mysteriously appear.
No, you can tell me how old you were.
Okay. That.
When did you become interested in women's rights? How old were you at that time?
well, I think I was about probably only 12 years old. Quite unusual at the time because it was then thought that men only could do the thinking and that women, many people didn't even think that women would ever vote. But I foresaw then, I think that my advisor even tempered that part of my valedictory speech, that suffrage was coming, but mainly because I saw that the Americans had granted at first men who had some property worth 500 pesos only, I think. That men who had some property could vote. And I said, here were my aunts. I had only one uncle then. But here were my aunts who possessed property but could not express their rights. And then when my father got elected as town president, his leaders were women, and he won by only 7 votes. But imagine, his financier was an old maid aunt of ours. His leaders were women, and here the women did not, could not vote.
Weren't voters also required to be able to read and write at that time? Wasn't that one of the requirements? Didn't you want to say that you had to teach, during the campaign, you had to teach people to read?
Yes, later on. Later on, they didn't need to have any property, but they could read and write. So I used to teach especially our tenants how to read and write so that they could vote.
But those were only the male tenants.
Only the male tenants.
Yeah.
Later on, the vote was extended to men who could read and write. So I taught our tenants especially.
And how old were you at that time? You were a teenager?
Yes, I was just a teenager then, maybe 11 years old.
Below your teens. And the tenants were how old?
Oh, the tenants were old,
About 21.
more than 21. More than 21.
So how did that affect you? You had to teach these older people to read and write so they could vote, and they were all men.
Yes, so I just thought to myself, why is it that these people, just because they're men, who can vote, while I, who had started writing, I think I had started writing short articles.
At the age of 11?
No, maybe I was older. Because, I can't remember dates that far.
But I think you wrote your valedictory address on the topic of
The mission, the mission of the educated woman. I thought then that a high school education gave the right to be called educated.
so.
But the Free Press published my valedictory address, when I was already in the UP.
How was it received by the public? Was it the first article of its kind, do you think?
Well, the fact that it was published by the Free Press, I think the Free Press got some congratulatory letters about my speech.
And what did the men feel at that time? What is the general attitude towards women in politics?
Well, I remember there was a debate in the UP Women's Club. I was head of the press division, I think, but I engaged in a debate with Estela Romualdez, who was taking up law, and she took the point. She was an anti-suffragist, while I was pro-suffragist.
Why was she anti-suffragist?
Well, I can understand. I can understand really because she was taking up law. But the advisor of the UP Women's Club, who was Tante's mother, was very much in my favor.
Who won the debate?
It was a debate only in the sense that there were two sides, but there were no judges and it was not put to a vote. But I became more popular in the UP, and but I really had to fight for many things, even in the UP, and even though I got very high grades, because I did not take Spanish 1, which was 6 units, because the professor of Spanish called me to his office and said I did not need to take Spanish 1 because I knew enough Spanish to be in Spanish, to be enrolled in Spanish 2. And then I did not have practice teaching in the UP High because Dean Benitez, who was the Dean of the College of Education, said I didn't have to have practice teaching because I was teaching part-time at the Women's College. And so when that came up at the meeting before the faculty of the College of Education, they denied me the honors. They they put they interpreted the regulations according to the letter of the law and not according to the spirit.
What honors did you qualify for?
Well, the grades said I was qualified for highest honors. And so Dean Benitez, since Dean Benitez was away, and it was the University Council, which was composed of the ranking professors up to assistant professors, I think, which decided that I deserved highest honors, and therefore they gave it to me.
So that's how you became a summa cum laude.
It was called, they tried to anglicize the summa cum laude into highest honors. So even my diploma, I think, says with highest honors.